So, what is gender studies? Well, gender studies is a lot of things. At its core, of course, it is the study of gender, how it operates, how it's created, how it's used. So that includes things like how it limits people, how we decide gender exists. There are a lot of different areas that gender studies goes into. And in What is Gender, which is one of next week's modules, we will go really into depth on gender studies and all the different issues that it addresses. But I would like to identify some of the key players to give you an idea of how the field has evolved and some of the key issues surrounding it. Um, so, at its core, a lot of the issues of gender studies evolve around what is gender, what makes gender. We're kind of taught from birth, right? Or before that, really, that gender is very closely associated to sex. And a lot of people think it's very important to differentiate between those two. That, for instance, when a baby is born, right, what is the first thing that you hear? Do they say it's male or it's female? No, they say it's a boy or it's a girl, right? And that there is a difference between those two. That is kind of at the core of modern gender studies. Um, so some of this comes out of the works of psychologists like Sigmund Freud, right, who in the dissolution of the Oedipus complex and in his interpretation of dreams in general, kind of pointed to the idea that gender is formed, at least in the binaries that we know it, right? Man and woman, boy and girl, that it's formed because of the phallus. We all know what the phallus is. So, the phallus, he believes, is at the core of gender identification. And so he has this idea of what the Oedipus complex is. And in it, he refers to the story of Oedipus, who, just to kind of summarize the important point that he's talking about, ends up killing his father. And Freud's idea is that men and boys have to overcome their hatred for their father, which stems from their sexual desire for their mother, and that girls need to disidentify with their mothers because of penis envy. They want that phallus and they wish they had it and they don't. And when they realize that, then women have to disidentify with our mothers in order to kind of assert that. It's very complicated and really interesting, but it was the basis for this idea that gender is something that forms out of a need or a desire. And desire is kind of at that core of what makes gender in a lot of gender studies. We also have Lacan. So you have Lacan and Freud kind of had this like almost rivalry, I guess you could say. Like they both agreed and disagreed on a lot of things. They both believed in the Oedipus complex. But Lacan really doesn't think that the phallus is at the center of it. He doesn't think that the having or the not having of a penis is what makes you identify as man or woman. He started to suggest that a lot of it is in the symbolism, right? The symbolism of man, of woman, of father, of mother. And he takes it to the formation of language. So language, he believes, is what has created our ideas of what make man and woman. He also still ends up defaulting to, he kind of starts defaulting to that phallus, though. He kind of says in his Seminar 4 that yes, it is about the symbol of the phallus and the power that comes with the phallus. And that is what women are responding to when they are creating their gender identity. But what's interesting is, he kind of depicts that as not simply an absence, not simply a loss, but also a positive. He says that, women in some ways are more, sorry, I have a cat here. I apologize. She may pop up occasionally. She doesn't like when I'm not paying attention to her. This is Chuck. She says hi. But anyway, getting back to Lacan and Freud. So Lacan says that yes, it is an absence of a symbolic phallus, not an actual absence of the physical phallus that creates this dialectic, which by dialectic I mean there is a relationship between two binaries, two opposites that are dependent upon each other for their existence. And they're in a constant struggle against each other. So that dialectic of man and woman is based off of the idea that, women don't have that symbolic phallus, according to Lacan. But he says that this also makes it to where they don't have to reject their sexual desire in order to overcome and embrace the power of the phallus. It's very complicated and kind of confusing. A lot of those early theorists are, and that's okay. I have both of their works below if that's something that particularly interests you, is the psychological aspect of it. But then you have a lot of people later questioning that idea that, women are created because of their lack of phallus. um, so you have people like Shulamith Firestone in The Dialectic of Sex and Lucy Irigaray in This Sex is Which Is Not One, saying, hey, that's not right. That's actually centering the male experience and saying that men's experiences are at their core most powerful simply because they have a penis, even if it's a symbolic penis. However, Lacan's views specifically really influence a lot of gender theory as we know it now. For instance, Simone De Beauvoir, a French philosopher, in The Second Sex, which is really well known in gender studies, she suggests that woman as a category is constructed as kind of a not man. She says kind of we've been depicted as an other sex, not the default sex, not man. So there's man, and then there's not man. And she's pointing specifically to that construct, how it's something that is constructed and it's not real, and it creates a second sex, a lesser gender, an other gender. That because of that we will never be able to overcome because it's not even real. This gets even more complicated and influences the work of Judith Butler, who I'm sure you've heard the name of, maybe haven't read anything by, but she was a theorist that spoke a lot from personal experience and other experiences to really think through this difficult concept of what on earth is gender. And she really lobbed onto that idea that gender is a construct. But not only is it a construct in the sense that society has made it up, but it's a construct in the sense that we perform it constantly by looking to others as examples and mimicking them. So for instance, when you hear I am girl, I am woman, you start looking for examples of it around you, whether it's in your mother, your teachers, women on TV, and you start developing your idea of what woman means from those depictions, and you start mimicking and putting it on and performing it. Performance in the sense that you, for instance, dress like you believe women should dress. So, you shop in the women's section, you buy girl toys, you decide that you are girl and you will do things that are meant for girls. You will look and act the way that girls are meant to look and act. And this also applies to men, that they decide this is what is man, this is what is boy, and it's an imperative to be that and to act like that. And so in that sense, it's performance. Now, when she talks about performativity, she doesn't necessarily mean it's all super fake and none of us is anything or likes anything for real. She means it a little more in the sense that it becomes more real the more we perform it. So it's kind of like the fake it till you make it idea, right? The more you put on these clothes, the more you feel this way, the more you become that gender. It's a really interesting concept, and it's one that we've used a lot in contemporary gender theory. And so, when we're going into our What is Gender module, that idea of gender as a construct is going to be at the core of it, a lot of the work that we do. And it's going to help us to kind of question what gender is, what it means to be man, what it means to be woman, and why that matters. So below I've actually linked to a lot of these works I just mentioned, and I want you to look through them. I want you to pick one. You only have to pick one, and I want you to browse through it. Do you have to read it in depth? No, they're very difficult to understand texts, and I get that. That is cool. And they're all like translations too, except Butler's work. So pick one, browse through it, but really kind of pull out what you think the main points are. And maybe if there's anything that surprised you or really interested you that you'd like to know more about, because we're going to discuss it at the end of this module.